All right, well, I know we are at the hour now, so I would like to just pass this over to Jenny. Jenny has been leading a special interest group as well and really diving into this topic, and I can't think of a more wonderful facilitator for us today. So thank you, Jenny. I'm just going to go ahead and pass the virtual mic to you and take it away.
Thank you, Amber. Can everyone hear me and see my slides? Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Those that don't know me, I'm Jenny Whitley, and I'm an assistant teaching professor in mathematics, and I'm situated here in Parkville. And I am really excited to talk to you about a topic that's really important to me and how we can, as faculty, foster that sense of belonging and make a difference in our students' academic lives. And I wanted to start, though, to share just a little bit about me and my teaching philosophy. I teach math, as you heard, and I really do love to teach those freshman math courses where students are often coming in hating math or nervous about it, and it just seems to be something they have to get through. And this quote always guides me and reminds me why I'm here. Children, and you can insert students there, students learn more from what you are than what you teach. I think it's important to support the whole student intellectually, personally, and socially, and follow, and I'm guided by an empathetic pedagogy, being an ally for your students, listening to their experiences, being a guide for their learning. So why is belonging so important to me, and also I think important to all of us? Why focus on college students' sense of belonging? I do see it as a foundation for students' engagement, their retention, and their continued academic success. But to help us really understand why that is, I think it's important to put ourselves in some of our students' shoes and reflect on what it feels like when we don't belong. So I'm going to pause and mute myself for a couple of minutes to give yourself some time to think, and think of a time that you felt like you didn't belong. And then if you want to, feel free to share in the chat in just, if you can sum up in a few words, what impact did that have on your experience? It doesn't have to be an academic setting that you felt like you didn't belong, but if it was like a classroom experience, how did that impact your learning? So I'm going to mute myself for 2 minutes to give everyone a chance to reflect. It's so good to see all the chats coming in. If anything, it makes us all just feel like we're in this together. We've all felt this way at some point. We lose our confidence. I'm seeing we end up maybe dropping out or avoiding that class. We withdraw. We end up not caring and not reaching out when we know we should have been if we needed help. It impacts our desire to engage. Patty said, this is a psychosis for me. I feel like I never belong. That's me too. I think it's written because I'm a woman in math that I always will feel like I don't belong. So it's been an uphill battle most of my career. So I think we all have had similar experiences, and because of that, we can put ourselves, hopefully, as I'm going through these slides on the research on belonging, and we can now imagine what our students are feeling when they walk into our class if we don't first have that welcoming environment and try to foster that sense of belonging. This is why it's so important from the start. And thank you for continuing to type. I probably could have stayed quiet for a little longer. So thank you. So let's first try to define sense of belonging. And there's been, in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of research trying to define a college student's sense of belonging, because we're seeing that why it's so important and valuable in academia. Strayhorn is one of the leading researchers, and he defined it by using a qualitative study and asked college students to define it. So his definition is students' perceived social support on a campus, a feeling or sensation of connectedness, and the experience of mattering or feeling cared about, accepted, respected, valued by, and important to the campus community, such as faculty, staff, and peers. And it's one of those very convoluted definitions to try to define, and I think that's why it's really interesting for social researchers to look at it. But we all know what it feels like when we do belong versus we don't. It's hard to describe sometimes in words, though. And another researcher that is looking at more so inclusive teaching, so Addie and her colleagues have similarly done a thing where a qualitative study where they asked faculty what inclusive teaching looks like in their classes and what it means to them. And they, based off of that, defined inclusive teaching as designing learning environments that are equitable, where all students have the opportunity to reach their potential, and welcoming and foster a sense of belonging. And I always want to switch these two, even though that's how they define it in their research, A and B, because I always think that welcoming and foster a sense of belonging, that is the foundation. You can design this, spend all summer designing this amazing course that's equitable assessments and has all the great, research-based pedagogical practices. But if students walk into your classroom and they don't feel that sense of belonging, they're going to disengage. They can't engage in all that content that you put together. So again, we have to first think about that sense of belonging before we can even start making sure that it's an equitable learning environment for our students. Just a few more research that I think is really powerful to remind ourselves why this is important. A lot of research has looked at how social belonging is associated with higher achievement, academic achievement, and particularly most of the studies pull out those marginalized groups. For instance, that study looked at women in mathematics and the sense of belonging, and also racial and ethnic groups that are historically marginalized, and first generation students are three groups that are oftentimes looked at. And we've seen that a national survey saw that a lower sense of belonging is seen at four-year schools for those marginalized groups. And some predictors of that lower sense of belonging were mental health, persistence, and engagement. And then another study looked at Black, white, Latino, white achievement gaps for GPA, and they found that inclusive or a lack thereof campus climate and their choice of a major, which makes sense because again, if you choose a major where you are set up so that you're not going to belong, like women in math, I give the example again, it's going to be an uphill battle your entire time. So that explained half of the achievement gap, while the other half was explained by family characteristics and prior academic preparation. So just to kind of sum up what the research is telling us and really our own experiences, because all of you have felt this at some point or another, the importance of the sense of belonging for our students' learning. We know that by fostering that sense of belonging in our classroom and on campus, you're then more likely, students can engage fully in their learning. They are more likely to see an increased motivation. They're more open to critical feedback, therefore they persevere. They take greater advantage of learning opportunities. They build important relationships with peers, faculty, and staff. And generally, they just have more positive attitudes about their class and their teachers. So we can see how all of these are really related, interrelated, and they feed off of each other, I also think. And that's why it's so foundational. I also found this image from the Mindset Scholars Network that I thought was really just a good visual that lays it out on how that sense of belonging can really affect their academic achievement. So at the top, you see a student is a member of an underrepresented group, or maybe they just experience a challenge like a low exam score or feelings of loneliness, which is really common with freshmen. So then on the left-hand side, that's a student that sees that that feeling, that setback is not normal, it's not typical. So then they're gonna feel like they don't belong. They interpret that as they're not welcome here. Everyone else seems to be doing fine. That leads to withdrawal, which a lot of you shared in the chat, you withdrawed. And then that leads to diminished academic engagement and performance. And then what we see is that's a cycle, right? Then they're going to do poorly in that course, which continues to tell them that they don't belong, and it just cycles through. And I can see myself in this on the left-hand side in this cycle before, and it took a lot to pull me out of it. And I also see a lot of my students, especially right now in November. This is such a critical time where students are starting to withdraw. It always happens after fall break, they withdraw. And I am thinking about what can I do as a faculty to insert myself so I can break that cycle for them, help break that cycle for them. And then on the right-hand side, you have a student that also has that setback and that challenge, but believes that it's normal to have those challenges. They may worry about belonging, but they have some type of support system or something that keeps pushing them forward, which leads to that sustained involvement in the academic and learning experience, and that increases their academic engagement. And again, that's the cycle that keeps them pushing forward. Again, I can see myself also in this one, the one where I had to keep pushing and those positive outcomes. So I also, as a faculty, think about not only can we help those students that are at that critical time where they're starting to withdraw, but how can we change the way that we're teaching from the start so that hopefully we make them feel that sense of belonging. They see struggle as normal at the beginning, so it doesn't necessarily have to get to that level of withdrawal. Oops. So just to kind of pause for a second, because I shared a lot of the research, and just thinking again and reminding ourselves why we're here, why we have continue to devote ourselves to inclusive teaching. As we saw in the research, and even just reflecting on our own experiences, there's simply too much to lose to not commit to inclusive teaching and a sense of belonging. But conversely, we have everything to gain. So I just love this quote to remind myself again why I'm here for my students. So what I plan to do is just sharing some small changes that we can make in our classes today or tomorrow that will have a large impact on our students. I know it's November and we're all exhausted and barely surviving. So I didn't want to focus on those big curriculum changes that we could make, because that's not where my brain is at all. But what can you do to either reach out to those students that you know that they're starting to withdraw and make that change? Or if you're thinking more so spring semester, what can you do at the start of the next semester that sets yourself up and sets your students up for success, and with that feeling of sense of belonging at the start? So none of these strategies are necessarily groundbreaking, but I do think that they are what students remember. When I read my teaching evaluations, this is what they remember. This is the difference that they make. Again, it's not necessarily, it's about teaching the whole student, not necessarily always teaching the content. And a lot of these are just a good reminder what to do when you're feeling stressed and you forget some of those little things. So I'll go through how I do some of this, my own strategies, and I'll share a lot. But first of all, you have to get to know your students before you can really make a difference. You have to know who they are, both personally, socially, and intellectually. And then 2, create multiple avenues for students to reach out to you. So I always have to remind myself that students will not stop in my office or even come up to me after class to tell me how they're doing. I have to create, oftentimes they don't even email. I have to create other avenues outside of those traditional ways so that they reach out and let me know how they're doing. And then also, if they did reach out, I have to make sure I listen and make changes and accommodations. 3, it's important to be explicitly promoting a growth mindset when facilitating the learning opportunities. I say it's explicit because, again, we want students to recognize that failure or struggle and mistakes are not failure on their part, that it's a normal part of learning. So promoting that and being explicit in your class and saying that is really powerful for a lot of students. And then 4, we need to value diversity in learning and experiences. Again, we want students to feel like if they walk into a classroom and just because of their experiences that they feel different, we want to make sure to pull them in and make sure that they know that diversity is a powerful thing for all of us. So some of the things that I do for each one of these to get to know my students, I'll share actually in the chat a couple of things. Just a second, let me pull up the chat. So this one is the introduction questionnaire that I use. Everyone has their own ways of getting to know their students at the beginning of a semester. This is just something that feel free to use it if you want. But essentially, on top of the get to know you discussion board, I have a very thorough questionnaire which asks them a lot of details. They identify their preferred names and their pronouns, but then they also identify their academic experiences, what is their best math experience, what's their worst. And then they also identify their personal and social life, what's going on outside of classes. Do you work 2 jobs, have kids, sports, stuff like that? How many classes are you taking? You'll see it's very thorough, but it really helps me get to know them. And it also just shows them that I care about what's going on. And then because I'm asking all those questions, I use that feedback in a lot of different ways. So for one, I use their names and their preferred pronouns in class. One way that I do that, because I'm really bad at names, I can remember faces, but names just kind of go right over me. So I use name tags, which is kind of elementary school, but they make name tags on the first day in my face-to-face classes, and they put it right in front of their faces so I can call on them, which makes me feel a lot less awkward in class instead of just pointing and saying, hey, you, what's your question? So use their names, they feel connected that way. And then again, just a simple reminder to chat and connect with your students. So use those questionnaires or those discussion boards at the beginning and sit down next to them at some point and ask them about a hobby that they shared. So I think, again, it's just connecting with your students and getting to know them makes a big difference to them. Creating multiple avenues for students. I wanted to share this quote that came out of a recent Inside Higher Ed blog, and it's from Robert Talbert, a mathematics professor. And he says, you can do all the right things that the research, workshop, etc. tell you to do, but if you don't engage in an actual two-way communication with students and listen to what they say, it's probably going to end up just as noise. And I think that's, again, such a good reminder that it's a lot of times those simple little things that we can do to connect with our students. So this is probably the area that I've changed and I've grown the most as an instructor is, again, not assuming that students will reach out to me. And I create multiple avenues for students to reach out to me in ways that they may feel more comfortable. So you'll see I do a lot of exit tickets and surveys in my class. So I'm going to share one of them in the chat again. So this is my weekly exit ticket, and I'm actually going to pop on over and share it, show you what it looks like. So it looks like a lot the first time you see it, but they do this every single week. In my online class, it's embedded in the course. In my face-to-face, there's a QR code at the end of the last day of the class, whether it's a Thursday or Friday, on the end of the day. And they get pretty used to it that it doesn't take for more than a couple of minutes. So first they rate their confidence on what we just learned, the learning objectives of that week. So 1 is I got it, I feel confident and competent. 2, almost, I still make some small mistakes, which we talk all the time in class about. That doesn't mean you don't understand. We all make mistakes. I do constantly. 3, kind of, that means like there are some holes in your understanding. So I need to maybe meet with somebody or review on my own. And then 4, I'm lost. I need time with a teacher, me or a tutor. And you'll see I also put it on my students to, if your rating is like a 3 or 4, please reach out to your instructor or a tutor to set up a meeting. So I'm trying to teach them, again, thinking about freshmen, to reflect on their learning and then regulate, make an action plan on how can you fix that. So, and if they don't reach out to me after they keep rating themselves a 3 or 4, I will reach out and kind of try to, again, break that cycle. But you'll see it's really quick after they get used to the rating scale, they just rate themselves on everything that we've learned. And then I also have this open-ended box where I just ask, how are you doing? They can share anything that they want there. They can leave it empty. And you would be amazed how many students, this is where they tend to want to share what's going on in their lives that's impacting their experience and their learning. So I just had a student that shared that she lost her job and then lost her apartment in the last couple of weeks and is really struggling. So that's why she apologized for being absent and getting behind. And that was her place to feel confident and comfortable enough to share that, so that I can take action on that and hopefully help her. So this is one way that I get a lot of feedback from my students, and it's consistent in my class. I also have just general, surveys that I've created over the time throughout the semester. Here's just one example of a sense of belonging one, because that's really important to me, especially with my fall freshman courses, making sure that they feel like they belong, because we do have a large international students at Park. So, but just kind of soliciting feedback either through anonymous or maybe not anonymous surveys, depending on your goal with the surveys. I also send a lot of check-in emails, which I know I always get the feedback that must take so much time, but it really doesn't. I just select some group of students every week and I send emails. If they're doing good, I just let them know that I see them and I appreciate their hard work. And if they're falling behind, I ask them how they're doing and what's going on so I can hopefully help them. I also, as you saw in the weekly exit ticket, I make it a requirement to come see me if they're struggling. I do that in different ways, either through the exit ticket, I reach out to them or they reach out to me, or after their first exam, they do corrections where they have to come and talk through the errors that they made and kind of prove to themselves more than prove to me that they do understand it. And after some time, because we all have bad test days. And then lastly, after you've done all this reaching out and they've reached out to you, you're listening to your students. Is again, just a good reminder to listen, be flexible, reach out to the BIT team, and try to put yourself in those students' shoes and how you can be flexible and accommodate for them. 3 is another big change that I've made as an instructor. is I make it more explicit and I talk about the growth mindset and how mistakes and productive struggle are normal. And I do this on day one, and I continue to do it in every single class. And I think it's important that students see that that's normal and we talk about it all the time. I can share some of the Genialese that I've created that embed in my online classes, and students do them as like a quick assessment. And if you want to embed, I have different ones on different topics. I think I shared the growth mindset one, but I also have one on mistakes, practice makes permanent, and productive struggle. And so these just are a quick way that they can learn about things that are not necessarily math, but it's related to math, because they have to first learn how to best learn in order to learn the content. And then I also, that you saw with the exit tickets and the surveys, I'm constantly providing opportunities for students to reflect and self-regulate. And I'm providing opportunities where students can learn from their mistakes and, better themselves and show me that they're learning from their mistakes. And then finally, a term that you see a lot in education is fail forward. So providing opportunities for students to fail forward. So in other words, instead of waiting, I know I had a lot of college classes where your whole grade depended on a midterm and a final. So instead of waiting until that moment, using some low stakes assessments, adaptive homework, stuff like that, to which a lot of my assessments are all low stakes, except for exams. So using that to let them fail. In math, we also do something called adaptive homework, which is mastery-based grading, where on their homework, not quizzes or exams, but on their homework, they can fail as many times as they want, essentially, until they get it right. So Mike asked a good question. What are my engagement numbers for my exit tickets and surveys? Good question. So in my face-to-face class, like I said, it's a QR code that they scan. So if they're in class, they're doing it. It's part of the day. So if they're in class, which I require attendance, I'm one of those professors. So there's usually most of them are in class, is pretty good. But I would say about 80% in a face-to-face class. And then in a online class, I would say it's lower, but at minimum 50%, I would say. It depends on my class for sure. It's kind of, and it depends on how much I push it, but I do remind them about it on Fridays always, to remind them to complete their exit ticket, but some just get out of the habit and it's not as high for sure in online classes. Any other questions? It's a good part. Thank you for chatting. I always have to pause and breathe myself. How do you recommend enforcing required attendance? I just tell them in order to learn, you have to attend. And so, I tell them why that's important to me, and that I know that students that attend do better. And so I just take attendance every class period. And they do, the way they get their attendance grades is they do like little exit tickets where they're doing problems, math problems, and then they're rating themselves on their understanding, or they're doing corrections. They have like little activities where they get points. So it's not, it's a low stakes again, but it will impact their grade eventually, because it's worth 10% of their grade if they never show up. But if they're never showing up, they're not doing well on their exams. And so it's kind of all connected. But I definitely explain to them why, because I think that's something that I see a lot of times, is students are like, I don't understand why I have to be here, but they do better, and we know that, but explaining that to them is important. Lastly, I wanted to talk about a little bit about valuing diversity. And this is something that I probably could do a little bit better about. In math, what I do in my math class at least is I'm very explicit about that I value diverse perspectives on how to do math, that we all see math problems differently, and we all have different ways to solve problems. So we share different strategies. And I ask for those diverse students' voices to be presented. Now, math's a little different and unique than maybe your class is different, but I still think these are all important no matter what you're teaching, is that you're asking and being explicit about that you value diverse perspectives in the content that you're teaching. And that you're providing multiple pathways for students to show that they understand and engage in the content, how they engage with each other. That we, I think participation is always a scary word for introverts. So we show different ways that we let them engage with each other. And then lastly, I make proactive accommodations. Again, kind of similar to like the office hours, I don't assume anymore that students are going to know to go to disability services or know to go to find a tutor. And so I just make that a big part of my class. And we talk about that from the perspective, again, that I teach mostly freshmen, but it's still important to make those clear pathways where it's a normal thing to seek academic services or student services. And so it's just a part of your class. And you're not just, those select students don't feel they're different in that way. And you may be doing more in the diversity for sure, this category. I feel like there's a lot more that could be done here, sharing diverse perspectives. Yeah, Patty, I agree. I think, and I don't think that's just Park. That's what the research also shows, the student surveys, is that students do not know what's out there, and we have to be explicit. Just the other day, because I talk to all my students, even though I'm not their advisor, I go through my rosters and I make sure that after my class, they're in the right math class after this. For their majors, and I talked to them about how to register, and a student was just telling me, I had no clue that we had to register in college. They're used to high school where you just kind of, I think it's all done for you. I don't remember how high school was, but and I sometimes forget that too. That they don't know that stuff, especially in the fall. The fall is always tough to remind myself on how much we have to teach these students. That's outside of our normal curriculum. So we went through a lot of strategies. I'm hopefully, like I said, none of these are groundbreaking at all, but they're all good little reminders of little things that we can be doing to help our students. So I'm hoping that you took away something that you would like to try. With the rest of time, which actually I must have talked really fast because this did not take as long as I thought. So that's good, because then we have plenty of time to digest. So with the rest of time, I thought we could go out to breakout rooms so that everyone's in a smaller group and they feel comfortable to share. And you can share what strategy you're excited to try, why you chose that strategy, like what in particular maybe are you seeing from your students this semester, and what do you need to do better to make that positive impact. So let me set the breakup groups up, and we have 23, so I'll do So I think everyone's here again. I think I didn't lose anyone. Some might have left because you have classes. I know it's 12:50. But does anyone, just a quick Q&A, does anyone have any questions for me or others? Thoughts as we close up? Hopefully you had some time to debrief though in your small groups. Like I said, I hope this was just a good reminder to slow down and think about the little things that we can do to make a difference in our students' lives. I really don't think any of these, again, were groundbreaking strategies, but hopefully there's something that you can utilize. I should put in here, I have not shared my email. If there was something that you didn't get the link of, or you want to see more, like my Gina Lee success tips, just reach out, feel free to reach out and I'll share whatever. That's one of the reasons I love education, is we always are sharing everything. And so thank you all. I learned a lot from when I went into the small group and heard what you guys were doing. I'm always tweaking what I'm doing in my classes to make it a little bit better. So thank you also for all of your feedback, and hope everyone has a great last month, and I'll see you around, hopefully.
Yes, and we'll do our virtual applause. Ginny, this was such a fantastic session. It just flew by. As you can see from the chat, we have all learned so much. Thank you also just for sharing your resources with us. That's huge, and really helps set the roadmap for us to kind of integrate this pretty easily into our own work. So just thank you so much for such a great, meaningful, useful session for all of us today, Jenny. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all for sharing your time with us today and joining this transformative teaching exchange. So thank you, thank you. And we will hope to see you back at our next one, which will be in spring 1. Hard to believe it's already November. All right. You guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.